This is a method that I have used and developed over my years of training and knowledge gained that has prevented me from hitting a single plateau in pretty much my entire training journey. Most athletes that you will encounter, more than likely including yourself and including me, are self-taught athletes training at home, in their living room, in their bedroom, and they rely on personal knowledge and motivation to structure and consistently train. However, the reason you clicked on this video is because personal knowledge can be flawed. And because all of these athletes are training alone without a coach, they will encounter plateaus where their progress will suddenly flatline, and they'll eventually get demotivated and, in the end, quit entirely. However, there is a way around this, and that is what we'll be covering in today's video. Finding the correct balance and formula, so to speak, on how to sequence your training for not only non-stop progress, but also learning how to identify the cause of your plateau whenever you encounter one. In order to understand this sequence in full, we can start from the very beginning. When you're first starting to implement skill training, you're going to start training towards the tuck variations, and despite these being the easiest variations, they are still incredibly new to your body and a very awkward position to be in. So when first training towards this first progression, you're going to be training at a pretty high intensity because your body's not used to it. So in order to learn this new progression, you have to force your body to adapt to it with copious attempts and max holds of the progression. You're going to be training at a very high intensity. And because you're training at such a high intensity towards a progression that you can't quite do yet, you're going to have very low hold times and going to failure very often. So to combat that, you're going to need not only more rest between sets, but also more rest days throughout the week. And then once your hold time starts increasing and your body actually starts first adapting to this position that you're introducing it to, you can move on to more volumetric work. This might seem like a really heavy band because of how thick it is, but it's actually really not far away from where my waist sits when I do a set. So it's not actually giving that much assistance, but just enough assistance. And it is after you've unlocked this skill that you can move on to the next segment in this sequence, if you can call it that. And in this next segment, we're going to be working on more volumetric work in order to increase the hold time of the progression that we just unlocked for a few seconds, rather than forcing our body to be in this position. We're telling it that it's normal, and to get used to it is essentially. A method that you really want to hone in on is the grease the groove method, where you're putting your body through constant exposure in this position, so your body has no choice but to adapt and to treat it as a normal everyday thing. And once your body treats this position as a normal everyday thing, it will eventually increase your hold time and it will become more natural. You can increase this constant exposure and volume by adding more sets per session. Well, whether or not this is more sets to failure or just adding more sets for more time under tension. Not all of these sets being to failure. And it's once your hold times are consistent, not 3 seconds one day and 10 seconds on a really good day, but 9 seconds on one day, 12 seconds on another day, 10 seconds on another day. Once they are consistent, you can move on to the next segment in this sequence. The next and final part of this sequence is form. You want to improve your form and almost perfect your current progression that you've just unlocked before moving on to the next one, so you can build healthy habits, make sure you're activating the right muscles, etc. And while you should always be striving for proper form in all of your sets, it's not always possible when working on a progression that you've just unlocked. For example, you might have unlocked this progression, but either you start out with lacking form or you have a 10-second hold, but your form slowly breaks down until you go to failure. When working towards improving your form, this is another intensity method, you could say, because performing a progression with near perfect form is going to be more intense than sloppy form. This means that your hold times will be shorter with conscious effort for perfecting your form. This means that you will have shorter sets, but a few more sets, because you're going to stop your set before your form starts breaking down. Your goal should be consistent hold times with proper form before moving on again, where you would then focus on more volume while focusing on form, increasing your hold time with this proper form, meaning either more sets, more training days, even drop sets with bands, etc. And another big issue that I find plagues a lot of self-taught calisthenics athletes is that they will go onto the internet and find these 3-step, 5-step, 10 steps to unlock your dream skill, or these 5 steps will make sure you don't have another plateau in your life, like this video, I guess. But these self-taught calisthenics athletes take this information for what it is. They will think there is only those 3 steps, those 5 steps, this concrete sequence, but that's never the case. Training is very, very fluid. It constantly changes, especially calisthenics, where everybody's body is different, everybody's goals are different, etc. So while I may have laid out this very specific sequence for you guys today, there are plenty of in-between phases to all of these steps, so to speak. But implementing these in-between phases is very intuition heavy in order to correctly implement them, you need to be very aware of how your body reacts to training and have the knowledge to be able to implement this. So let's say you're transitioning from intensity work to volume work, but don't quite have the prerequisites, the hold time, etc. to go full in on volume work. Let's say you only have a 2-3 second hold and you're doing 15 seconds of 2-second holds. You're not gonna get anywhere. You would either have to add a few more sets to your session, add more sessions per week, or even drop sets once your hold time starts increasing so you can increase your time under tension. And implement those methods one by one until you're now doing volume work. Now, to go from volume to form, every set you begin with should start with proper form, even if it doesn't end in proper form. Remember, you're still trying to get your volume in while slowly implementing some form work. And maybe even your first sets should stop before your form starts breaking down, but your later sets can break down a little bit to get more time under tension. To go from form to back to intensity work, because you're working on a harder progression, begin implementing that harder progression with assistance. So sometimes even with drop sets to your previous progression that you have mastered. Even implementing drop sets from that harder progression to the progression that you're working on perfecting your form. Maintaining that proper form at all times. But when working on your harder progressions, at the beginning of your workout, you're not going to have proper form. It's with these in-between phases and mini steps between these big sequence steps that actually make the most difference, despite being the smaller steps. Just a quick disclaimer. I am by no means a professional or a coach, and I'm not even the most elite calisthenics athlete out there, so I am not throwing myself out here on the internet trying to pretend that I am the messiah of calisthenics, but this is a method that I have used and developed over my years of training and knowledge gained that has prevented me from hitting a single plateau in pretty much my entire training journey. If you find some logic in my information, feel free to give me a follow if you found this helpful. And with that, see you in the next one, because gravity is just a guideline.